different tonight. We're going to have less fill in the blank. And what I have designed for this section is basically just a wealth of information on the differences between men and women. I'm going to demonstrate to you how different we are. And one of the factual statements I'm going to make is this: men, ladies, will never change. We won't. It's not a fault. Never. We are wired a certain way. Men, that lady you're so in love with, that's her. She's wired that way. Now, that doesn't mean we can't communicate.
God made the husband the leader for a reason, and he has great responsibility in a lot of areas, spiritually, mentally,
Yes.
the whole home, everything. And he's going to be judged by how well he does that job. And when a husband won't communicate or want to talk about a problem, you're saying that can't be fixed?
No, I'm saying his reluctance will always be there. But we can change our attitude based on information that works for us, so we can communicate in spite of who we are. Does that make sense? See, I am not advocating for not communicating. That's not what we're saying. That's not why you come to church. But you can communicate in spite of the differences. Does that make sense? That's one of our problems. We like to fix things right now. I'm going to show you a slide on how guys think about fixing stuff. And it may be old news to you, but I was looking it over again today, and I was thinking, that's pretty good, because that really hits us guys on the nail. When we've talked about walking into a room, I do this so often, it's kind of scary, but forgot why I went in that room. And I've gone back to where I started and hoping something's going to, click. Yeah. Well, I do too, but I hate to brag about it, but that's just, just who we are. So anyway, my goal in presenting all this information is this. First of all, you'll notice a lot of lines where you can write down the things that resonate with you. When I go to hear a pastor, when I listen to our pastor, I'm looking for a nugget. Now see, as a former preacher, you should see my notes. I kept a lot of them. Pretty near everything, sooner or later you're going to go through everything there is to say, and you start on the second time. But he's going to say something that's going to grab me. Something I've not heard before or didn't pay attention. And if I get one of those, I think he's the best preacher on the whole block. You know what I'm saying? And he agrees. Of course he does. But that's what I'm hoping for. Yeah, that's a nugget. I'm just looking for one, and if I get two, I remember telling a former pastor, that caused me to think. I don't think I've ever thought about that before. And this fellow was really good in the Hebrew language. And so that little nugget, that was a jewel, and I really appreciate it. So let's begin, shall we? What you expect about relationships and what you expect out of them has a direct correlation on how you communicate between you and others, whether you're husband or wife, or you're talking with your kids or whatever. And one of the things I would like to get into your thinking is this: the more intense feelings that you have of affection for one another will also magnify the anger you might have, the way you fuss with one another, because these things are elevated. So being angry with one another really isn't a problem as long as you kiss and make up. But you can have anger in there, you can have fear in there, you can have hopelessness, and it seems elevated because of your affection for one another. Not your disdain, your affection. So these feelings, what they do is they can intensify the friendship between individuals as you recognize that pain and frustration I'm feeling, they're probably feeling the same thing. Now, here's an interesting statement. So, men and women will often say the same things, but from a different perspective. I'm going to show you that even when a man and a woman agree, and you think, hey, that's really cool, you are agreeing from a totally different perspective. Your reasons for agreeing 99 out of 100 times are different. And so it's the agreement that counts, not how you got there, you see? And so, by the way, when we're communicating with one another, one thing that you just don't do is, fellas, primarily, don't answer with a simple yes or no. That tells the lady nothing. Because in her mind, she's going to know, well, why do you disagree or why do you agree? And we never ask why, right? But you see what I'm saying? We need to learn to talk. I discovered an interesting thing in my own life, and I don't know quite what to make of it. But since my missus died, and, we hung out before we were married, when we were married, we were never apart. I find that I am far more sensitive than I was when she was alive. And I have no explanation for it. And I find myself being far more communicative with my daughter than I was with the lady I love. And so I kind of like that because she's got a pretty good idea who I am and what I'm thinking and the reasons for the way I'm thinking. Now, if this time together means anything to you, if you'll learn how that's done, you will find yourselves in a far richer relationship. So don't do that yes or no, okay? That just doesn't work. So you understand that we think differently. God designed us that way. And so often when we disagree, we tend to think that's a heart problem, when it really isn't. It's a head problem. We just think differently. Our perceptions, by the way, are not always accurate. A diplomat walks into this big celebration. It's a state thing, and it's a party for all the people who are there. And this particular diplomat had been on a party of his own for quite a while, so he was a party all by himself as he walks into the room. And so as he comes in, another person comes in this flowing red gown, looking sharp, and he being a little bit inebriated, he thinks he's really onto something, Wow, he wants to know this individual. He goes across the room, and he kneels down, and he says, "May I have this dance?" That no came back so fast, it took him by surprise. The apparition in red said, "First, you're drunk. Second, they're playing the national anthem. It's not dance music. And third, I'm the Archbishop of Lima." Wrong perception altogether, right? So we need to be aware of that. Now, one of the things we're going to do tonight is we're going to share with you the principle of bridging. If you remember that perspective is everything, and it comes from so many different ways. So if we begin to understand the differences in how we experience emotional pain, we're going to take so much misunderstanding out of our relationship. And we begin to say, that makes sense. Now I get where you're coming from. And so an example is Billy Graham was asked how he stayed married for 50 years to his lady. And he says this, Ruth and I are happily incompatible. So he recognizes, yeah, we're incompatible. So what? It just doesn't matter. And so when we understand the differences and we practice living together based on those differences. You see the difference? I'm going to live based on that. I understand it perfectly. If you believe, for instance, like many in the world do today, that two people in order to stay married have to be exactly alike, you've got it totally wrong. Each of us is an individual. Each of us brings our individuality, and the Bible says that now the two are one. Well, if you saw my first slide, you saw that there were different attributes for the men and for the women, but there was a hole right in the middle that only that woman could bring to it. Women will recognize when someone's lying, and us guys think everything is just fine. Now, if we ignore that, we're doing something wrong. So I want to share tonight some of the differences, or a lot of them, that we're going to find. And this guy found a genie in a bottle. And of course, when he let him out, the genie was eager to grant him one wish. And so the fellow thought for a while, and he says, I would love to go to Hawaii, but I'm afraid to fly. I'd get seasick on a ship, so what I want for you to do is build me a highway from my home here to Hawaii. And the genie, he just breaks out laughing, and he says, that would be impossible. The logistics make that so. Think of how much concrete and steel and all the rest of the stuff that would go into that. It would be impossible. So I want you to think of another wish. So he thinks for a while, and the fella says, okay, I got it. My wife thinks I'm insensitive. Help me to understand women. Why they cry when they're mad, and why they cry when they're happy. Help me to fully understand women. Well, the genie took a big gulp of air and looked straight at the man, and he said, do you want that highway to Hawaii to be 2 lanes or 4? Claiborne in the comic strip told a friend, if you think for 1 minute you understand women, you have it timed just about right. Well, we're going to take away some of that. If you've seen the movie National Treasure, and the hero, he can figure out riddles and stuff, and he's a pretty sharp guy that way. And so at the end of the film they're sitting together, and she says, now, you've got a couple of those antique tables in your place that came to them while they were on their adventure. And he says, yes, I'm going to have them delivered to you next week. And she says, well, so I'd like you to bring the tables and move in with me. And he says, no. So why did you say no? And he says, well, because when you say so, you're mad about something. And she says, not always. Sometimes it means I'm mad, and sometimes it doesn't. And you're so good at figuring out riddles, you'll figure it out. So she admits it doesn't always mean what it always means. So we're going to start with this. We're going to talk about the structure of the masculine and the feminine brain. They are simply wired differently. And the nerve connections between the two halves of the brain are like the difference between a superhighway for women and for men, a one-lane dirt road. Now, fellas, I'm exaggerating a little bit there, but I kind of want you to get that. I'm going to show you that they are so different, it's unbelievable. Research has shown that a man's brain can go into a rest state many times during a day. And that rest state can be up to 70% of an average day. So that begins as a young child and it continues throughout life. Look at this one. What you doing today? Nothing. You did that yesterday. I wasn't finished. A woman's brain doesn't require that same rest time. And so the woman's brain, feminine brain, is active at least 90% of the time. And so that kind of confirms that what we're thinking, she's always thinking. But that thinking out of impulse control that goes with it is a result of a woman's brain developing earlier than a man's. Now, by the way, don't think for a minute I'm talking about intelligence. That's not it. You can have an IQ of a whole lot and still not be very communicative. So they're uniquely structured. Men have 6.5 times more gray matter in their brain than a woman has. A woman has 9.5 times more white matter than a man. Now, gray matter is wired for local, focal processing. In other words, we're focusing on a single situation and we're calculating how we're going to handle that. So what we're doing is we're utilizing a compartment of the brain function until the end of that structure. Now, white matter is wired for integrative processing. So for the woman, she can assimilate different or contrasting information from several brain areas at the same time. So what that means is a fellow's brain is going to be more active in the physical centers, and a woman will be more brain activity in the emotional centers. And so if there's anything that demonstrates clearly, it's the sex drive. The part of the masculine brain that's responsive to sex hormones is 2.5 times larger in a man than in a male. So if you wonder what's always on his mind, ladies, he's wired that way. And why that is, I don't know. It just is. So men are simply programmed to be more responsive to sexual feelings. And so with that lower activity in the brain, men are always looking for excitement. So when you add higher levels of the hormone testosterone, it takes very little to get a man going. Now, there's a movie called 6 Days and 7 Nights. And so the hero and the heroine, she has to go to a business meeting on another island. And they're on one of those 6 days, 7 days cruises things, you know. And so he asks her, what do you do? She tells him she's the assistant editor for a woman's magazine called Dazzle. Never heard of it, he says. Well, he says, you're not the kind of person we're looking for to read our book anyway. So she shows him the cover, and the headline reads, Your Derriere. 5 ways to tame the beast. 10 ways to light his fire. He just laughs. He thinks that's as funny as it gets. And he says, you don't really want to know how a lady turns a guy on? And, yeah. He says, just show up. That's it. We're easy. We're guys. No magic to it, is there? Just show up. I kind of like that one. Boy, that's as simple as you can get. So here's some additional differences in our brains. And if we understand the differences, it's going to make communication and relating to one another just a whole lot easier. Now, at birth, boys have one language skill active area, and girls have 3 or more. So when they're fully developed, women can have 6 or 7, while the fellas remain with 1. Men are more likely, by the way, to have their language skills focused in the dominant side of their brain. It also means that having that language skill in the right side of the brain, we do not notice as many details, and we're not overly interested in them. We just say, okay, so what? We like our information short and sweet. Get to the point. You never want, by the way, fellas, never say that to your lady.
Get to the point.
Get to the point. Yeah, there's your gem. Get to the point. Just don't do that.
Just the facts, man.
Here's another one, that women hear better listening from both ears, while men hear best in one. And because of this difference, activities essential to communication are far easier for women. We talked about it earlier. Men are designed to problem solve. And what this can do is cause a delayed action in the response. Have you ever been, ladies, around your husband and he's doing a task and you're trying to talk and he can't do both? And then if you tell him how to do something because your brain is functioning and you say, how did that go? Not very well, did it? And that's because we're simply wired different. And if that happens to you, it's not because he's not listening. It can take as much as 7 hours to process complex emotional data. So when a man experiences new feelings, we have to go back to the drawing board and start the process all over again. We do not integrate the same way. So the way our brain is wired, and our hearing being basically on one side of the brain, men often hear less than what women say. We just don't hear it. It's not a fault, and it's not that we wouldn't like to hear it. We just don't. And sometimes you ladies, you get excited, you might talk too fast, and if you're using too many words, the guy's not going to pick up on it. And so what happens, instead of promoting communication, it ends up just corrupted, and then everybody gets frustrated. And see, that's not what we want to do. So when you learn these things about one another, it makes a difference. We also hear less background noise. We live in an apartment. Gail will say to me, "Did you hear that?" No. Said it sounded like a bomb. I didn't hear it. There's an activity the younger people above us engage in. I don't hear any of that. Right above, yeah. And so I don't hear it. I sleep sound, you know. But that difference is one reason why, as a parent, you're going to have to talk louder to your boys. They're not deaf. You just have to talk louder to them because of the way we hear. So if you ever watched boys and girls studying, girls study better in quiet areas. And us fellas, we study better when there's noise going on, like playing the TV or something. And so that difference is one of the reasons we can zone out in front of the TV. This particular fellow who wrote a play called Defending the Caveman says, men don't watch TV, they become the TV. We can shut out everything around us. We just don't hear it. We're not picking up on it, see? And so women, the difference is, they're going to pick up more information than the male through hearing, eyesight, senses of taste and smell. And the ladies, they tend to process more emotional, sensation, compassionate related information through the verbal centers of the cerebral cortex and the center of their brain, because we're wired differently. So this is what causes fellas sometimes to think the woman's more emotional. They're not rational in their thinking. And because we're physically oriented, we tend to move information toward the brainstem, and so we turn fewer subtleties of feelings like emotion, sensation, empathy, or memory into words. We just don't convert it because we got that action-oriented thing. And if you're asking again, why am I telling you all this? What difference does it make? If we know how the brain is structured and we understand the differences are biological, unchangeable, they're natural, and when we understand brain structure, it increases our opportunities to enjoy the differences. We begin to understand them, and then they become strengths that both of us can tie into. So, one of the differences in the construction, the language area for the women is focally organized, and for the men, the language area is diffusely organized. So focally, what that means is we're taking the most important and bringing an image into focus. Diffusely, this is for us guys, it makes it less intense, more widely scattered, and less serious. That's the way we're wired. Now, there's generally one communication area on one side of a man's brain. And you see the physical inspection down there by the brainstem, and you see what happens to the emotion? It all but disappears. And so he's going to think later, and he's going to feel something whenever. That's just who we are. That's how men are wired. If you get this into your thinking, it changes the way you talk to one another, the way you relate to one another. You may have heard the story of this. 3 guys are out hiking in the woods, in their forest, and they come upon this large, raging, violent river. And so needing to get the other side, the first guy, he prays and he says, Lord, give me the strength to cross the river. Then poof, God gave him big arms, strong legs, and he's able to swim across the river in about 2 hours, almost drowned twice, but he finally made it. So the second guy, thinking he's wiser, he prays, Lord, give me strength and the tools to cross the river. Poof. God gave him a rowboat, strong arms, strong legs, and he rowed across the river in about an hour. He almost capsized once, but he made it across. Third fellow really thinks he's got it going on. And he says, Lord, please give me the strength, the tools, and the intelligence to cross the river. And poof, he was turned into a woman. She checked the map, hiked 100 years upstream, and crossed it on a bridge. So this leads into our next area, and I mentioned earlier the principle of bridging. Women tend to connect bridges between what their partner has just said and what they're thinking about and how they want to respond. So by using lots of words, a woman stimulates many parts of her brain to see, feel, and sense possibly related ideas, experience, and memories all at the same time. So what this does, it leads to new ideas, different ways to accomplish a task or solve a problem. So connecting one thing to another or including additional information is what we call bridging. And what it does is it causes us men to think there are gaps in a conversation. All the while, it makes perfect sense to the lady. And then the women wonder, why can't he follow a simple conversation? Most men don't understand this at all and appear to ignore the preceding comments made by their partner. So, this is a scene from a movie called Bagger Vance. He's a golfer, and apparently a pretty good one. And in this scene, this lady is upset. Oh my, she's upset, and she's just after him. And she says, you can't treat me that way. Now, apparently, he left her sometime in the past without saying a word. She says, you can't do that and just expect to take up the romance like nothing happened. He says, well, I'm sorry. She says, sorry is no good. That's not good enough. Well, he wants to know what he can do. It was so long ago. Now, I want you to notice the look on his face. Do you see it? That's what I call what just happened look. The connection between what happened 16 years ago and today for the woman was only a moment ago. For the man, it was so long ago. So bridging occurs when a woman connects events emotionally and relives those feelings in the now. In other words, it just happened. Not 16 years ago. It just happened. You can tell. I mean, that's so beautifully written. He just doesn't understand it. We do. And so, okay, I get it. Here's a woman's brain. And are they thinking and feeling? Well, yeah. There can be as many as 6 communication connections on both sides of the brain. And if you'll notice, they're all tied together. And what this does, it adds an emotional energy. So this is unique enough that when you start getting tied in, you can almost develop a language of your own between you. My Sally and I were sitting and talking one evening, and we're sitting here, and my brother-in-law is sitting there, and he's on his 5th or 6th wife, so it's obvious he just doesn't get it. And so Sally and I are talking, we're just having a great time. All of a sudden, he stands up and he always hikes his jeans up like this. And when he hikes the jeans up, you know he's upset about something. I figure, so what? So he walks out of the room. It wasn't just a moment, he comes back and he says, I do not understand a single thing you two are talking about. Sally and I were communicating, but see, having that connection and overcoming some of these things, we virtually had our own language, and so poor old Don never did get it. So, men, because we're action-oriented, what we're going to do is choose action first and then talk second. And what happens in real life is it sometimes causes us guys to be more unrealistically optimistic, especially when we're involved in a situation that requires action. So the mind, what it can do is it causes us to take fewer preventative measures to avoid a negative outcome. So you ladies, you understand those times when you try to caution your man about something, and you can see trouble, and the guy says, oh, it'll be all right. Looks like they're headed for trouble, doesn't it? Now, during challenging situations, women are more likely to choose talking first. And for men, a task is not a fellowship time. Conversation is an interruption, an invasion, a distraction, and the guy's usually going to react pretty strong to it. Now, in the area of action, by the way, women can tune into everything going on around them, And women can handle 5 hectic activities at one time. So this is a movie called Just Like Heaven, and I showed you a clip where she's having an out-of-the-body experience. And so this is before that accident. And so in this scene, the 2 sisters are talking to one another on the phone. Now, one is a doctor in the hospital. And while she's talking on the phone, she's walking, she's goal-oriented, and she analyzes an x-ray for this fella. She moves to another individual and she touches a lady because she's standing on the drip tube and the guy is sitting in a wheelchair hoping that medication is going to help him. She signs a number of forms for the nurse at the desk. All the time she's moving and all the time she's talking on the phone to her sister. Now, her sister's cooking dinner. And her kids throw a ball in her direction. The ball comes flying in. She bats that ball away without even thinking about it with her ladle. It flies in and boom, off it goes. She checks the food in the oven. She takes it all, and all the while they're talking on the phone because she's prepared that dinner for her sister to come by later. As she's checking the food, she starts to cut it. She says, "Who put SpongeBob in the lasagna?" The difference you see is multitask, not giving it a second thought. But us fellas, we're fixers, we're task-oriented, and it just makes us more physical in nature. So we actually need to focus on one thing at a time. Now, ladies, fellas will stop one activity to attend to another. You may forget about the first altogether because of the distraction in the center. The second one, what that means that we'll reorganize and come back to the first task later if we happen to think about it. So women are more relational, more nurturing by design. So women connect reason with intuition. And they're more attentive to details because people, feelings, relationships are primarily important to them. They're more perceptive, as we said earlier, and better knowing it when problems are present. So the ladies are going to pick up on feelings, sense the differences between what people say and what they really mean through body language and facial expressions. So it also helps ladies to pick up on dishonesty much quicker than men. Now, I witnessed this. My Sally could always tell when those kids weren't telling the truth. I thought they were little angels all the time, but that just really wasn't true because she just had a better idea of when they were telling the truth and when they weren't. And so by doing this, women are more relational with them and the others, and it's a fundamental developing block in human relationships. Now, this is a reason in most cultures around the world, women had a greater influence over their kids in the early developing years, and men from puberty to adult life take over. And I mentioned that about age 13, those 2 boys became mine. Because they developed the attitude with all that testosterone flowing around that they didn't have to listen to a woman. Well, that woman just happened to be my wife. And I taught them they do. By the way, one of the things going on in our world today, and you can see it, they're promoting kids don't need a father in the home. And that's the biggest lie you can possibly imagine, because that dad is going to teach them responsibilities. He's going to teach them how to get along differently. And what a home needs a man and a woman there, because the 2 of them are one, and they're raising people who are going to be different. So what happens is, when there's a dad in the home I mean, did I tell you about the date when it wasn't working? My wife were on a date, and we were up in Winthrop, Washington. And we had been up there before and had a marvelous time. And we were trying to replicate it. None of the things we did before was there. It just wasn't working. And I said to Sally, there must be something going on at home. We need to go back and find out. Well, I go back, and I find out my 2 boys are in jail. And my 2 boys, out in the flats and by Snohomish, between Snohomish and Everett, when it floods, they get a brand new crop of mushrooms. And those things will make you high as a kite. Well, my 2 guys, I just talked to this about my son. He said, we crossed across in this big pipe thinking no one would know we're coming in there. And when they get across there, the sheriffs were there. Hi, boys, how you doing? And, of course, they end up in jail. They had borrowed my daughter's car. She's mad as all get out because she doesn't know where it is. And she's got someone trying to help her find that car. My son calls and says, Dad, you got to come get me out of jail. And I said, son, you got yourself in there. You get yourself out. Well, he got himself out. My youngest son, he was in the children's size because he wasn't as old. And I guess he raised so much ruckus, they basically threw him out and told him not to come back again. But my son agreed with me the other day because they were here visiting. They never did anything like that again. I don't think they would have learned that if they were responding to their mom. But you got yourself in, guys, get yourself out. Well, they did. Men are going to use a direct approach, by the way, and we're going to say, do that again, and this is what's going to happen to you. I see this happening with my grandson. He's got 2 boys, 17 and 19. And the 17-year-old has been doing the dumbest stuff. Just dumb stuff. And what happens? Dad takes away the keys of the car or takes away his phone for a certain period of time. And the young man doesn't like it, but he'll turn around and do something dumb again. He's a good kid. And when he's 30 and growing up, it'll be altogether different. So, ladies, what ladies try to do is get the kids, how are you going to feel, or how's the other person going to feel if you do that? See, we're direct action. We want you to obey. It's like obeying the coach at the football game. Do what he says. You'll win the ball game. You ladies say, you want to feel good about playing the game? And all the guys around you? So, what happens is this. Without the training of both mom and dad, those kids end up without a moral identity and lack any sense of purpose. I was watching a program just today, and it occurred to me, one of the big differences between the major religions in the world today, one of them doesn't have a moral authority. Christianity is based on a moral authority. The Jewish religion, based on a moral authority, God. But when you don't have a direct connection with God, you don't have a direct connection to that morality aspect of it. And that's how they can kill people when they don't agree. Quite a difference, isn't it? So, kids are just going to hurt themselves and everybody else around them. So, we need one another. It's good to know how other people feel, knowing how you're affecting them. But at the same time, you need that moral authority that says, don't do that again. So, one of the things that happens in the personal developing for men and women, a woman is born with a central question, am I desirable? So that's why they learn to analyze behavior, so they can better meet their need for approval. How do I fit in? So that's the reason women tend to read and interpret other people's behavior so they can feel more in control. It's a core value area. So when a man rejects or ignores a woman's perception, they're saying, you have no value to me in one of their most fundamental, basic areas. A pastor in ministry, if I learned anything, I learned to listen to my missus when she was telling me about people. Those insights were invaluable to me because she could read them when I could not. And she knew I valued that because it just made a difference. And so when we ignore that fundamental part of their lives, that perhaps has more power to break up a relationship than any other thing that might happen. When we say to that lady, well, let's jump in bed and have some fantastic sex, and you just told her, you don't have value to me, what do you think that dual marriage is going to get you? That's the difference, see? Us guys, we're born with the question, will I make the grade? Will I succeed in life? Will I measure up? And so we learn about power and politics so we can feel more in control. We like structure. We use structure to stay in control. Now, here's another scene from a movie. It's a comedy, and these are two guys who think they're in control. And what they're doing is they're discussing their relationship with their various women involved in their lives. And so the guy on the left, he's saying, men must be in control of their women. Otherwise, they'll suck the life right out of you. And the other guy, oh, yeah, okay. And he says, I'll give you an example. My mom, when I come home, she knows she better have food on the table waiting for me. Here's a guy who thinks he's in control, but he's living at home, dependent on his mom to feed him. The other fella, he really misses his female assistant. They had an agreement when she came to work for them. She began to do everything for him. She went with him when he picked out a suit. She would pick out his tie, what looked good, what to say. And it was ridiculous. And when he didn't keep his end of the bargain, she left. Well, what you see there, he's lamenting, saying he really misses her. Well, I guess she was doing everything he should have been doing. He's almost lost without her. And because of her departure, he's not in control. What is happening here is both ladies are providing structure in their lives. And when that structure is there, they perform rather well. Structure, by the way, helps us guys conserve energy. Energy is conserved when we fit things into rules and regulations. So that's why us fellas learn to focus on the task. By focusing on the task, we maintain our objectivity, we can improve our performance, and earn respect. So we tend to put the pursuit of self-worth and personal power first, with intimacy following on after that. And so that objectivity forces us guys not to spend too much time reflecting on how we feel about what we're doing. We just don't attach the same thing to it. That's us. We're guys. We're easy. So that mindset causes a lot of men to have trouble choosing between hands-on family matters and a project that needs to be finished at work. And we gain our sense of well-being from accomplishing goals in our chosen profession, being a good provider. Now, to a man with a family, handling business well is taking good care of his family. He may be focused on it, but that's his goal, to take good care of his family. It's an expected standard around the world. And both the husband and wives need to express gratitude for what each of you is contributing. Now, women experience their well-being and how the home feels. She experiences personal identity in the way the home looks. Her way of providing is the home. So husbands really need to give their wife free rein in what decor and style make up the home. In my home, when we were doing, Sally would say, "How do you like this?" And I'd say, "I like it." She says, "I'm not so sure." And then I'd say, "I don't like it either." She provided a home that was truly comfortable. And today, if you come to my home, based on my training from my missus, our home is always company ready. Always. I may leave my plate beside my chair at night, but first thing in the morning, it's up and gone, if my daughter hasn't already moved it. Because I want you to come in there and feel comfortable, because it's a direct reflection on her. Every time we moved or changed the house around, my job was to hear what she wanted and do it or have it done, which really meant I better do it. And I would say, "Sally, do you have any idea how much work that would be and what it would cost?" Didn't care. Just didn't care. Do it. I'm going to show off a little bit now. If you'll notice in the bottom picture there's some weeds in the background. When we moved into this place, that whole backyard was covered with them. They're about that tall. And we pulled out every one of those. And then as I was raising two great-grandsons, every morning when they came over, we would pick the rocks up out of there and build walls and all kinds of stuff with them. This is what it looked like, what we did for my Sally. This is looking out from a gazebo toward that same empty backyard back there. In the back, I put up a fence, in front of a fence, and every section, the boards were different. So it was kind of like a mosaic. This is the same thing looking from a different angle. And you'll see us sitting there. I've got flowers growing all over there. I have roses growing. I have a Betty Boop in the front yard. I have not a red rose, but it's red in the other. I bought a yellow one for honoring my son, which was a different kind of rose. Because if the outside was mine, I wanted you to be comfortable there too. That you could come in there and sit down and just feel comfortable. Now I'm going to finish with this. A woman knows all about her children. She knows about dentist appointments, romances, best friends, favorite foods, secret fears, hopes and dreams. A man is vaguely aware of some short people living in the home. Ladies, most men will forget their mistakes because they think it just doesn't make sense to have two people remembering them. Fellas, women don't really want to know what we think. What they want to do is hear it in a lower voice. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but women usually have the last word in any argument. Anything a man says after that is the beginning of a whole new argument. I'm not going to do this scene because he's explaining everything to this young fella who needs all this information. And Dad says, "Now, do you understand what I'm saying?" And he says, "No." And Mama's telling the daughter all this stuff, and she says, "You know what I mean?" And she says, "No." And they didn't. But I thought you might be interested in this. So my wife was praying for me one night, and my Sally was a prayer. I always thought that when Sally prayed that everybody in heaven stopped and said, Sally's on the line. Let's see what's on that girl's mind. And I relied on her to pray. And so she says, Lord, I would like understanding, to really understand my husband. I really want insight into him. I want insight into his moods and how he's feeling. And she says, if I pray for strength, I'm just going to beat the daylights out of him. That was my lady. So I'm hoping tonight that you got some little gem out of all this. It's a lot of information, I understand. But we live in an information-rich world, and the more information we have, the better we're going to not only meet one another's needs, but we can share this with our neighbors, with our kids. I share this stuff with my grandkids all the time because I want them to succeed. So I kind of roared through it again. If you have any questions or comments.
Well, we were really looking forward to the 5 levels of communication, so we can fill in those blanks.
Okay. I've got it in my answer sheet over here, and so you can write them in. Because it's like anything else, it starts at a base where there's no communication at all. And then, of course, the 5th level is where we're really talking. The first 3, I mean, you might be trading information, but nothing is personal. And then the 5th one, that's where we're really communicating with one another. So.
I really, have you ever heard of Mark Gundor?
No.
I highly recommend you watch the Tale of Two Brains.
Okay.
And it very much goes into the detail that you talk about.
Uh-huh.
How a man's box is, he's
Yeah.
compartmentalized.
Yeah.
And a woman is like a waffle. Wires everywhere.
Yep.
All interconnected. You know, I will see something, if I watch a movie and I think she'll like it, I stop. I save it and I wait until we're together. And I
Good.
say, honey, I have a movie
Yeah.
that I think you and I would really like. But you gotta really watch it because, you know, it's a deep story. And if you don't pick up on all the verbiage, you'll miss it. You'll miss the mystery. You know, I want you to see if you can solve the mystery.
Yeah.
And so she goes, okay, that sounds good. She'll sit there. I'm watching every word, and I use captions because I don't hear too good.
Yeah.
So I'm watching, I'm studying, and I look over, and she's like this. Got her phone in her hand,
Yeah.
and she's doing this. I go, honey, are you listening?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, what are you doing? So I'm playing a game. She could play a game. And, I mean, like Tetris or something
Sure.
like that on her phone.
Yeah. But she's got it all.
And not miss it.
Not miss a word. Yeah.
And figure out the mystery. How does she do that?
She's wired different.
Well, the boxes he was talking about, in the very center is a box called the nothing box,
Uh-huh.
and women aren't allowed there.
There's nothing there.
I bought him a shirt that said on the
Yeah.
nothing box.
Yeah. Because there's nothing there. This is a personal observation, by the way. I happen to like romantic comedies. And I watch those things all the time. And it occurred to me that they are stories of redemption. You watch them. The couple is redeemed at the end.
Except the War of the Roses.
Well, yeah, but that's all together. I'm talking about a romantic comedy. There's nothing funny about that one at all. Yeah. a saying I've tried to keep a hold of comes from the wedding date. And I'll watch that every 2 or 3 months. I just like it. And he says to her what I think is one of the more romantic telling things you'll ever hear. He says, I think I would have missed you if I hadn't met you. Does that speak volumes or not? I would have missed you. I would have missed my Sally if I hadn't met her. I really would have. Of course, I know that now, but I think it's a good saying. Okay, Lord bless you real good. We'll see you next week. We're going to do more fill in the blank. I'm going to show you some things about emotion and how it really works. I've got some slides that show just...
For the women, right? That's
Yeah, sure. You hold that thought for a week, and we're going to communicate next week.
Think about it.
Hey, thank you all for coming. I hope you got a gem, at least one. Okay.
So, will you the two author